Now, Paul says, after this, he says in verse 17, "Let no one cause trouble for me, for I bear on my body the brand marks of Jesus." Paul was preaching a message, and he was following that message, and because of that message, he was being persecuted. When we look at, for example, in 2 Corinthians 11, Paul was talking about the different things that he had gone through. And he says, "I was in far more labors and more imprisonments," and he says, "beaten without number, often in danger. 5 times I received from the Jews 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned." Now, when Paul was beaten and when he received lashes, typically they would put some little rocks or things on the strands of leather, and it would usually rip the skin off people. And so he probably had scars all over his back and shoulders and his lower section there where he had been whipped and beaten, and so if you're stoned to death, he probably had scars, all over it. We can't even imagine him. But Paul says that I have the brand marks of Jesus. Now, the word brand marks that's what the New American says. The Greek word there is the word stigma, and stigma means a kind of a scar. Now, when a runaway slave was recaptured, they would put this imprint on their skin, and so it's like a tattoo or scar, and they would put this imprint right on their forehead so that anybody seeing this runaway slave in the future would know that he has been a runaway slave. And this little stigma on him would identify him. And so nobody, if they saw this guy trying to do something, they know that he's a runaway slave. And so Paul says, I have these stigmas, these brand marks on me that people know that I'm preaching the gospel. They know that I'm a follower and a preacher. I'm following Christ. I have the brand marks of Christ. So Paul was willing to do the things and be persecuted for the things that he was teaching. There was sincerity there, completely different than the hypocrisy that we see with those who are Judaizers. And so there is quite a difference there in not only their motives, but also in their sincerity. And these people didn't care about what happened to them, but Paul had earlier written, he says, I wish that they would mutilate themselves. And so he's talking about, they're causing you all this pain, and he says, I wish that they would have that, because they weren't sincere